Welcome to Romance Beyond the Porch.
The day I married my best friend's widow, I could feel eyes on me even when no one was looking. It felt like the whole world had already made up its mind about me. Some people thought I was doing something kind. Others thought it was strange, maybe even wrong. I could hear the whispers without anyone saying a word, but none of them knew what really happened. None of them stood in that hospital room with me. None of them heard the last thing my best friend asked me to do. And none of them understood that the little girl holding my hand that day was the reason I couldn't walk away. It had been almost a year since Daniel died, but some days it still felt like it happened yesterday. That night never left me. It was raining hard, the kind of rain that makes everything look blurry and distant. Daniel was driving home from work when a truck ran a red light and hit his car. I remember getting the call. I remember how my heart dropped before I even answered. And I remember the silence on the other end when they told me he might not make it. Daniel wasn't just my friend. He was my brother in every way that mattered. We grew up together. We went through school together. We built our lives side by side. He was the kind of person who made everything feel easier just by being there. Losing him didn't just hurt. It felt like something inside me had been taken away forever. But Daniel didn't leave the world empty. He left behind Laura, the woman he loved more than anything, and Emma, his 5-year-old daughter who looked at the world with the same bright eyes he had. After the funeral, life moved on for everyone else. People went back to work. They returned to their routines, but Laura didn't have that choice. Her whole world had fallen apart and there was no way to put it back together. I started visiting more often. At first, it was just to check on them. I would bring groceries, fix things around the house, and sit with Emma while she told me about her day. I told myself I was just doing what any friend would do. I told myself I was keeping my promise, but the truth was their house felt different now. It was too quiet. The laughter that used to fill every room was gone, replaced by a heavy silence that never seemed to lift. Laura tried to stay strong. She always had been, but grief changes people. The confident woman I once knew looked tired all the time, like she hadn't slept in months. Bills started piling up. Work became harder. Every corner of the house reminded her of Daniel, and there was no escaping that. One night, everything broke. Emma was asleep upstairs, and Laura and I were sitting in the kitchen. The lights were dim, and the house was completely still. She didn't scream or cry loudly. It was quieter than that. The kind of crying that comes when someone has nothing left to hold on to. I didn't know what to say. I just sat there with her, feeling helpless. That was the moment I realized something had to change. I just didn't know how yet. A few weeks later, she told me something that made my chest tighten. Daniel's family wanted to take Emma. They believed Laura couldn't raise her on her own. They said it was about stability, about giving Emma a better future. But I could see what it was really doing to Laura. She was already barely holding herself together, and now it felt like everything was about to be taken from her. Lawyers were getting involved. The situation was getting serious, and all I could think about was Emma. I remembered the last time I saw Daniel alive. He was lying in that hospital bed, weak but still holding on. The machines around him made quiet sounds, and the room felt colder than it should have. He grabbed my hand with what little strength he had left and looked straight at me. "Take care of them," he said. At the time, I thought I understood what he meant. I thought it meant being there, helping when I could, making sure they weren't alone. I didn't realize how far that promise would go. One evening, Laura asked me to sit down with her at the kitchen table. Her eyes looked tired and her hands were shaking slightly. I could tell she had been thinking about something for a long time. Then she said it. She asked me if I would marry her. For a moment, I couldn't even process the words. It didn't feel real. There were no emotions behind it like you would expect. No happiness, no excitement, just desperation. She explained everything. Marriage would make things stable. It would help with the legal situation. It would protect Emma from being taken away. It was the only solution she could see. I sat there in silence. Marrying the woman my best friend loved felt like crossing a line I never imagined. It felt wrong in a way I couldn't explain. But then I looked over at Emma, sitting in the living room playing quietly with her stuffed rabbit, the same one Daniel had given her, and suddenly the choice didn't feel complicated anymore. I said yes. The wedding was nothing like a wedding should be. There were no decorations, no music, no celebration. Just a small courthouse, a few papers, and quiet voices. It was over in minutes. Emma stood between us, holding both our hands, smiling like something good had happened. And maybe, in her own way, it had. After that, life felt strange. Laura and I were married, but it didn't feel like a real marriage. We lived in the same house, shared responsibilities, but kept a careful distance from each other. It was like we were both afraid to step into something we didn't fully understand. Everything changed because of Emma. She brought energy back into the house. Every morning she woke up full of life, pulling us into her world of school, laughter, and endless questions. Slowly, the silence began to fade. At first, she still called me uncle. That's what I had always been to her. But one evening, after I helped her with a school project, she looked up at me and asked something that stopped my heart for a second. "Can I call you Dad?" I didn't know how to answer. I told her she could call me whatever made her happy, but inside I felt the weight of that word. I wasn't trying to replace Daniel. I never could, but somehow I was stepping into a place he had left behind, and that scared me more than anything. The first time Emma called me Dad in front of Laura, the room went completely silent. It wasn't planned. It just slipped out naturally, like it had always been there waiting. Emma was sitting at the table, swinging her legs and eating cereal when she looked at me and said, "Dad, can you pass the milk?" I froze for a second. Laura froze too. Our eyes met for just a moment, and in that moment I didn't know what she was thinking. I didn't know if I had crossed a line without realizing it. I didn't know if this would make things harder or easier, but Laura didn't say anything. She just looked back at Emma and gave a small, quiet smile. And somehow, that was enough. From that day on, things started to shift in a way I didn't expect. It wasn't sudden. It didn't feel dramatic. It was slow, almost unnoticeable at first. But the space between Laura and me began to feel smaller. We started talking more, not just about Emma or bills or schedules, but about simple things. How our days went. What we were thinking. What we missed. Sometimes, late at night after Emma had gone to bed, we would sit in the living room without the TV on, just talking quietly. At first, those moments felt a little awkward, like we were stepping into something we didn't fully understand. But over time, they became the part of the day I looked forward to the most. I started noticing things about Laura I hadn't paid attention to before. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was thinking, the way she smiled when Emma said something silly, the way her laugh sounded, soft at first, then real and full. It confused me, because I had always seen her as my best friend's wife. That's who she was in my mind, and I never allowed myself to see her any other way. But now, things were changing, and I didn't know what to do with that. One evening, I came home later than usual. Work had been stressful, and my head was full of things I didn't want to think about. The house was quiet, and for a second I thought they were both asleep. But then I saw Laura in the kitchen. She was standing by the sink, looking out the window. The lights were dim, and the whole room felt calm in a way I hadn't noticed before. "You're late," she said softly without turning around. "Yeah," I replied, "long day." She nodded, then reached for a plate. "I saved you dinner." It was such a simple thing, but it hit me harder than I expected. No one had said that to me in a long time. I sat down and she placed the plate in front of me. We didn't talk much at first, just small things. But then after a few minutes she sat down across from me, and she didn't get up. That was new. Usually we kept things moving, always busy, always focused on something else. But now she just stayed there watching me quietly. "How was your day?" she asked. I looked up at her a little surprised. "Same as always," I said, "busy." She nodded like she understood more than I was saying. "I'm glad you're here," she said. It was such a simple sentence, but it stayed with me long after that night, because I realized something in that moment. This house didn't just need me anymore. It wanted me. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. Our routine became something steady, something real. We cooked together sometimes, not because we had to, but because it felt normal. Emma would sit at the counter, talking nonstop, while we moved around the kitchen like we had done it 100 times before. Sometimes our hands would brush by accident, and every time it felt like something I wasn't ready to name. I tried to ignore it at first. I told myself it was just comfort, just familiarity, just two people getting used to living in the same space. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. The hardest part wasn't what I was feeling. It was the guilt that came with it. There were nights when I couldn't sleep. Nights when I stared at the ceiling, thinking about Daniel, thinking about whether I was betraying him. He was my best friend, the person I trusted more than anyone. And now I was living in his house, raising his daughter, and slowly starting to feel something for the woman he loved. It didn't feel right. No matter how natural it seemed during the day, at night, it felt like I was crossing a line I could never uncross. One night it became too much. I was sitting alone in the living room when Laura walked in. She noticed immediately that something was wrong. "You okay?" she asked. I didn't answer right away. I didn't know how to say what I was feeling without making everything worse. "I don't know," I finally said. She sat down across from me just like she had that night in the kitchen. "You can talk to me," she said softly. I let out a breath I didn't realize I had been holding. "I feel like I'm doing something wrong," I said. She didn't interrupt, she just listened. "I keep thinking about Daniel," I continued. "About what he would think if he saw all of this, me being here, us like this." My voice slowed down. "I don't want to disrespect him." For a moment she didn't say anything, then she moved a little closer. "You're not," she said quietly. I looked at her unsure. "It doesn't feel that way," I admitted. She shook her head gently. "You kept your promise," she said. "You didn't walk away. You didn't leave us alone when everything fell apart." Her eyes softened. "Daniel trusted you, that's why you're here." That word again, trusted, it stayed in the air between us. "I just don't know where this is going," I said. She looked at me for a long moment like she was deciding something important. "Neither do I," she said honestly, and somehow that made it easier, because for the first time it didn't feel like I was carrying everything alone. After that night something changed again. The distance between us didn't just shrink, it almost disappeared. And for the first time, I started to wonder something I had been avoiding for months. What if this wasn't just a promise anymore? What if this was becoming something real? After that night, nothing was said out loud, but everything felt different. It wasn't in big, obvious ways. It was in the small things. The way Laura would look at me a second longer than before. The way I started noticing when she walked into a room, even if I was busy. The quiet comfort that settled between us like we were no longer pretending. But with that change came something else. Fear. Because the more real it started to feel, the more I realized I couldn't hide from it anymore. One evening, Emma had fallen asleep on the couch again, her small hand still holding the remote. The TV was playing softly in the background, but neither of us was watching. Laura and I sat there in silence. The kind of silence that isn't empty but full of things waiting to be said. I could feel it building in my chest, that same pressure I had been trying to ignore for weeks. My thoughts were loud, but my voice refused to follow. Then Laura turned toward me. Her eyes were different that night. There was something in them I hadn't seen before. Not sadness, not pain, something deeper. "I've been thinking," she said quietly. My heart started beating faster, though I didn't know why. "About us." There it was, the word I had been avoiding, us. I didn't interrupt, I didn't even move. I just waited. She took a slow breath like she was choosing her words carefully. "This wasn't supposed to happen like this," she said. "None of it was." I nodded slightly. "I know. We did this for Emma," she continued. "For stability, for survival." Her voice softened. But somewhere along the way things changed. I felt it again, that truth I had been trying not to face. "I don't know when it happened," she admitted. "I don't even know how, but the house doesn't feel empty anymore. I don't feel alone anymore." Her eyes met mine, and this time I didn't look away. "I trust you," she said. Those 3 words hit me harder than anything else, because trust wasn't something small. It wasn't something temporary, it meant everything. "I trust you more than anyone," she added softly. My chest tightened. I wanted to say something. I wanted to respond, to tell her I felt the same way. But the words felt heavy, like they carried more meaning than I was ready to release. Before I could speak, she said something that changed everything. "Daniel knew." What? For a second I thought I heard her wrong. "What?" I asked quietly. She didn't look away. "Before he died," she said, "during those last few weeks, we talked about the future." My heart started racing. He knew things would be hard, she continued. He knew I would struggle, and he knew Emma would need someone. I could barely breathe, and he mentioned you. The room felt still, too still. What do you mean? I asked. Her voice was calm, but her eyes held something emotional beneath the surface. He didn't say it directly, she explained. He wasn't asking for anything like this, but he said if anything ever happened to him, you were the only person he trusted to protect us. I felt like the ground shifted under me. All this time, I thought I had stepped into this life by accident. I thought everything that happened was because of circumstances, because of pressure, because of a promise made in a moment of desperation. But now, it felt like something else, something deeper. You're saying he wanted this. I asked, my voice almost a whisper. She shook her head gently. Not like this, she said. Not as a replacement, never that. She paused, then added softly. But he trusted you enough to know that if you were here, we would be okay. I looked down at my hands. For the first time since Daniel died, the guilt that had been sitting inside me began to loosen. Not disappear completely, but shift. Because maybe I wasn't betraying him. Maybe I was doing exactly what he believed I would. I didn't know, I said quietly. I didn't tell you before, she replied. Because I didn't want you to feel pressured. I didn't want this to be something you felt forced into. Her voice softened even more. But now, I think you deserve to know. Silence filled the room again. But this time it felt different, lighter, like something heavy had finally been lifted. I looked at her again, really looked at her, not as my best friend's wife, not as someone I had married out of obligation, but as the woman sitting in front of me, the woman who had stood beside me through everything, the woman who trusted me, and for the first time I allowed myself to feel it without pushing it away. I think I started, then stopped. I took a breath. I think things changed for me too. Her eyes softened. Neither of us smiled. This wasn't a happy moment in the usual sense. It was something quieter, something real. That night nothing dramatic happened. There were no sudden confessions, no rushed decisions, but something shifted between us. Something settled into place. The invisible wall we had been holding onto for so long was finally gone. And after that, everything began to change in ways we didn't expect. Our conversations became easier. Our laughter came naturally. We didn't have to think about how to act around each other anymore. We just were. Emma noticed it before we did. Children always do. One afternoon, she came home from school with a drawing in her hand. She ran into the kitchen, excited like she had something important to show. Look, she said, holding up the paper. I leaned down to see it. It was a simple drawing. 3 people standing side by side under a bright yellow sun, one tall figure, one smaller, and one in the middle. I didn't need her to explain. That's you, she said, pointing at the tallest one. Then she pointed at the second. That's Mom. And then the smallest, that's me. I felt something warm in my chest. Then she turned the paper around and placed it carefully on the refrigerator like it was something special. At the bottom of the drawing, written in uneven letters, were 3 simple words, my family. I stared at it longer than I meant to, because in that moment something became clear. This wasn't temporary anymore. This wasn't just a promise. This wasn't just about helping or protecting or surviving. Somewhere along the way, this had become home, and just when I thought I finally understood what that meant, life gave me something I never saw coming. Just when I thought life had finally settled, just when everything started to feel right, something happened that shook everything again. It started with a phone call. I was at work when my phone rang. I almost ignored it, but something told me not to. When I answered, the voice on the other end made my chest tight. It was Daniel's father. We hadn't spoken in months, not since the legal situation had quieted down after the marriage. I need to talk to you, he said. His voice was calm, but there was something underneath it. Something serious. That evening he came over. Laura was nervous. I could see it in the way she kept adjusting things around the house that didn't need fixing. Emma was upstairs, unaware of anything. When the door opened and he stepped inside, the air in the room felt heavy. For a moment, no one spoke. Then he looked at both of us and said something I didn't expect. I was wrong. Laura froze. I did too. I thought you weren't capable of raising her alone. he continued, looking at Laura. I thought this whole situation was unstable. His eyes then shifted to me, and I thought you stepping in like this was inappropriate. I didn't say anything, I just listened. But I've been watching, he said quietly. Watching? Laura asked, her voice slightly tense. He nodded. I didn't want to interfere again. But I needed to know if Emma was really okay. My heart started beating faster. And she is, he said. Those words felt heavier than anything else he could have said. She's happy, she's safe, she's loved. His voice softened. That's all I ever wanted for her. Laura's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't speak. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out a small envelope. I found this while going through Daniel's things, he said. He handed it to me. My name was written on the front. My hands felt slightly unsteady as I opened it. Inside was a folded piece of paper. I recognized the handwriting immediately. Daniel S. For a moment I couldn't move. It felt like time had stopped. Read it, his father said quietly. I unfolded the paper slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. And then I began to read. If you're reading this, it means I didn't make it. My throat tightened. I don't know how things will turn out, but I know one thing for sure. I trust you. I had to pause. The words blurred for a second, but I forced myself to keep going. I've seen the way you care about people. I've seen the way Emma looks at you. And I know that if anyone can be there for them when I can't, it's you. My chest felt heavy. This isn't a request. It's not something you owe me. It's just something I believe. I swallowed hard. Take care of them, not because you have to, but because I know you will. By the time I reached the end, my hands were shaking. The room was completely silent. I looked up slowly. Laura was crying, not loudly, not uncontrollably. Just quiet tears that carried years of pain, fear, and something else. Relief. Daniel's father spoke again, his voice softer than before. He believed in you, he said. I couldn't respond right away, because for the first time since losing him, I didn't feel like I was guessing anymore. I knew. That night after he left, Laura and I sat together in the living room again. Emma was asleep upstairs just like so many nights before, but this time felt different. There was no tension, no confusion, no guilt, just understanding. I think he knew, I said quietly. Laura nodded. I think so too. We didn't say anything else for a while. We didn't need to, because everything that had been unspoken for so long had finally been said. Weeks turned into months. And this time the changes didn't feel uncertain. They felt right. Laura and I stopped holding back, not in a rushed or overwhelming way, but in small, real ways. We started sitting closer, talking longer, laughing without hesitation, and one evening, without planning it, without even thinking about it, I reached for her hand and she didn't pull away. That moment wasn't loud or dramatic, but it meant everything, because it was the first time we chose each other, not out of need, not out of fear, but because we wanted to. Emma noticed, of course, she always did. One day she looked at us, then smiled in a way that only a child can. You guys look happier, she said. I smiled back. I think we are. Years passed. Life moved forward in ways I never imagined. The house that once felt filled with silence became full of life again. Laughter returned, warmth returned, and something else grew quietly over time. Love, not the kind that starts fast and loud, but the kind that builds slowly, the kind that stays. People still ask me about that decision, about the day I married my best friend's widow. They expect something complicated, something dramatic, but the truth is simple. I didn't just keep a promise. I found a life I never thought I deserved. Because in trying to protect Emma, in trying to help Laura, I didn't just give them something. They gave me something too. A home, a family, a second chance. And sometimes when I stand in the kitchen and watch Emma laughing while Laura smiles beside her, I realize something that still surprises me. The choice that once felt like the hardest decision of my life was actually the beginning of everything I was meant to have.